15,000 miles ahead of you. And we've missed the mark to have that mutual respect and dignity as a family. And so I think COVID-19 has brought a really great exhale for our families to be able to reset and reboot and say, okay, what do you think is fair? And also to use your tweens and teens as your guides. I'm sure that you have watched them over the last 7 or 8 weeks maneuver Google Classroom and Google Chat and go to all sorts of different apps and things that they need to use in order to do their academics. And so this family screen time contract, again, is fluid. It's constantly changing. I would encourage you to be thinking about tweaking it every 6 months as your child ages. Somebody that's in 5th grade, 6th grade brings new challenges. It brings new friendships. It brings new apps, perhaps. And so, again, just going back to that social competence piece. If COVID-19 has taught us nothing, it has taught us that our kids are going to be our future digital leaders. And for a long time, we've denied that. And so for me, I'm super excited about this time to be able to see what they can create while they have some downtime, to be able to, maybe put sports and academics aside for now and really start working on their own digital footprint. So I'll pause there because I've said a lot. I don't know if there are any questions, or if Max, you have any questions before we kind of move into the brain development piece. So I think we lost Max. And we have a raised hand, so.
You know why? Because I muted myself for a change. No, thank you. I was saying we didn't have any chat or any Q&A yet.
Okay.
But what I really, and I like what you said about the contract as being kind of grade 6 through 10. And one of the things that we wonder about that we've had is just the, is there anything you should put in the contract about sleep or putting it down or not at meal times? I know when my daughter got her 10-year-old a cell phone, they've been really good about, hey, this goes away at meal times and this goes away when we're at family gatherings. Is there anything about that? Because a lot of this looks really good as far as preserving your family.
I would definitely add that in there. You and I talk about suicide prevention, anxiety, depression, and youth mental health all the time. One of the things that has come out in a regional study out of Queen Creek High School after some completions of suicides, they did a well-being study of all 1,500 students, and 72% of them prior to COVID said that they were getting less than 5 hours of sleep. And so sleep is crucial. I'll talk a little bit about what Chris McKenna from Protect Young Eyes spoke about on our first webinar. Bedrooms, bathrooms, darkness, and boredom. He calls it the toxic trio. Definitely pulling devices out of bedrooms is essential. I often get questions from older students, parents, like 17, 18-year-olds, like, really, he's had his, phone in his room all this time. Do you really think I should go yank it? It's probably a different conversation if they're launching into college. But the reality is all of us need sleep. That includes us grabbing our phones and scrolling in the middle of the night. So I always encourage a central charging station for dinner time and a central charging station overnight where all devices go. I would encourage that to be in your bedroom, not in the kitchen, not in the bathroom. I have video footage of teenagers crawling on the floor and taking the phone out of the case and putting a sock back in the phone case and flipping it over so parents can't see. So just as we would have been tempted, they are tempted as well.
Oh, us? But that would be, that'd be a nice clause to add in the contract. I'll put my phone away at 11 o'clock and leave it off or something. But anyway, I'll let you go ahead. But that's, appreciate you responding
so just, one last piece on this contract. knowing that these are the reasonable parameters and boundaries around device use in your home, you also have to know that the teen brain or the tween brain or the developing brain is going to make mistakes. They are going to break these reasonable rules, and you want them to. So some people are like, well, what's the use of a contract if they're going to break it? For me, it's a teachable moment, and it's a reasonable boundary to be able to go back to the contract and say, remember, you and I decided on this together. I'm giving you dignity in the use of your device. It's not a top-down management. We came up with this together. And so there's no aha moment. There's no surprise. The child knows, yep, number 5, I broke that. And so the natural consequence to my action is XYZ.
Yeah.
So for me, this is one piece of flipping the script on digital wellness and coming together and saying, okay, it appears that you're going to have to be on your device a lot for school. And so how are we going to manage both academics and free time?
Great. Good. Thanks. Should I go on to the next one?
Sure.
Great.
So I will link 2 articles to this video that we will post on the Deer Valley website. There are so many articles out there about what is happening to the brain. Screen time's horrible. They're burning their brains out. All of our kids are going to be mush. There's so much information out there. And many of the articles, you need to look at the source and make sure that you're looking at a professional researcher that actually has case studies behind them. And so over the last 15 years, I've really been careful about saying this causes this. We have correlational data, but we don't have a ton of causal data yet to say screen time causes anxiety, screen time causes depression. We have some suspicions, but we are probably a good 5 to 10 years away from really being able to look back and say this causes this. And so knowing that, this slide just really outlines different types of screen time. So in the upper brain scan there, you have really good blood flow. That's a kid doing some academic task online. That might be a game. It could be something even as simple as Minecraft, where there's logical, mathematical, and spatial things going on. On the bottom brain, you can see this is where we start to get a little bit worried about our students. So I break these into digital vegetables and digital candy. And so that terminology came from the book Glow Kids, Glow, Glow Kids, by Dr. Nicholas Katsakis, and he's out of NYU. And what he talks about is not all screen time is made the same. The academic screen time is the good stuff. That is the enriching, cognitive, all of the stuff that we want them to be using. That's your academic piece for the most part. Where we're losing our students is the digital candy. And you can see I kind of have some arrows on the brain there. We have dopamine dumps going on with video gaming. We have high stress levels with video gaming and some of these apps as well. We have serotonin levels that are starting to flatten out. Serotonin is our mood regulation hormone. Oxytocin is our bonding hormone. Cortisol is our stress hormone. Dopamine is obviously something we get from our reward system. So not all screen time is created equal. I think that's important to remember when you're creating a contract or even just looking at this time of COVID, like not even just YouTube. I have a daughter who loves to research on YouTube. She loves slime, and she will watch slime videos for hours if I let her. But the great thing about Ava is she will go watch the slime video on YouTube, make the slime, and then go sell the slime. And so for me, and I'll get to this, I have 3 C's when we're looking at screen time. We're looking at content, we're looking at context, and we're looking at connection. So even on YouTube, you can get great content and good context and make connections. And so again, just trying to disarm all of that panic around it. Not all of it is awful. Some of it is pretty awful, but not all of it is awful. I'll draw your attention just to the red arrow I have to her neck there. I think this is probably one of the biggest key points for parents to understand is this industry is after 2 things. Your money, first of all, and then I want to hook this kid and keep her on this video game for as long as possible. So it's taking that young brain and shoving it down into the brainstem and keeping it in its most primitive state. So when mean mom or dad walks in and says, it's time for dinner, get off your screen, the brain goes crazy because it's being dumped with dopamine and it's so far down into the brainstem. The only three responses it can have is typically fight, flight, or freeze. And so I think that's really important to keep in mind, especially with teenagers that are also surging with testosterone and hormones, that they are going to get highly agitated if you don't give them some sort of heads up or warning. And that's not to say don't take video games away. That's just outlining kind of what's going on in the brain and why you're seeing the behavior that you're seeing. If you want to do a cool experiment, put a heart rate monitor on your child as they're playing video games. It's frightening what these platforms are able to do. And so, again, just something to be aware of as we look at the developing brain. So we'll go to the next slide.
Thanks, Katey.
So I get a lot of questions about like, when should I give video games? When should I give my son his first device? I think you really have to consider what's your end game. If you're a middle school parent and you haven't given a device yet, you're in what I call the sweet spot. If you're a high school parent that's already given it and you're like, I have no idea how to put the lion back in the cage, there are some ways to do that and to balance it. But we have to be really honest with ourselves. We are on our devices 24/7 as well. Our financial livelihoods live on our devices. So when I speak to students during assemblies and I say, what would you like me to talk to your parents about tonight at the parent night? By and large, most of them say, can you tell my mom to get off her device? Can you tell my dad to get off his laptop? And so as we look at what should we consider, I go back to those 3 C's. What is the content your child's consuming? What's the context, and what kind of connection are they making? Those are some reasonable things that high school students and middle school students can understand. If you start in elementary school, I love you forever, because this is a journey and this is really, these are our kiddos. So on the side of devices, I'll just add, when you're looking at purchasing a device, I'd ask you to think about, what is the value of this device that I'm handing over? What's the function of it? And what is my desired outcome? If you have a 9-year-old that's getting off a school bus and you want her to be able to text you after school, you can get a really dumb smartphone that only texts and calls, like 5 people, right? You can also put all sorts of things on that smartphone that are probably pretty dangerous and pretty open to a lot of things that you don't want to expose your child to. And so we have to think about the end game. And for me, the end game is between age 8 and 18, I have about 10 years to raise a responsible digital citizen who can become a responsible digital leader, who can also wage through the battle of how to make a digital footprint that lasts and is going to make something for their future. There are so many kids doing so many great things with their talents. We should be using this time during COVID-19 to sit our middle and high school students down and start creating a LinkedIn account that's private, a digital footprint that can launch them into the future. So I'll stop there because I've been talking a lot. I don't know if there are any questions in the chat box yet.
We did have just one. Will the webinar be able to view later? And I know that we record these and put these on the website. And then with the closing slides, Katey and I both have our email addresses on there and are more than eager to answer any and all questions then, or as well as now. So no, Katey, I think you're good to go. Let me ask a quick question, because the LinkedIn, say I just said, I'll say I learned something from you, and I hadn't really thought about helping you know, our grandson or any of my granddaughters when they get a little bit older, making their own digital LinkedIn page and start to really think then about a different presence than they have on the web than, you know, kind of the typical high school football player does. But that being said, I know some of these football players are They're worried now about getting videos up for recruiters and all that. And so there's a great opportunity there for kids. But can they do that when they're young? And what's a good age to start that?
So I started with the twins in 5th grade. And so we've created just a very brief digital footprint, but my oldest is going into 9th. And so she's been working on that for the last 3 years. And so if you think about it, they have a digital footprint already that they had no say in. Most of us have posted at least 16,000, and I'm not exaggerating, 16,000 photos of our children by the time they're in 8th grade. By the time they're age 2, we've already taken 2,000. So they have a digital footprint on our Facebook and Instagram pages that they had no say in. So the goal would be to think about, what do you want the world to know about you? What do you want a future employer, a future internship, a future college or university? Anything that you ever want to do in life, what do you want them to know about you? How can you create a shiny digital footprint that lasts, instead of an Instagram or Twitter page with a bunch of profanity that might get you disqualified? Now, I'm not saying to teenagers, you can't have those platforms. What I'm saying to them is, unfortunately for you, people are watching your every move and nothing is private. And so a really responsible platform to think about using is LinkedIn, to turn it to private, to create it almost until, I would say, mid 9th grade, early 10th grade, and then turn it to public. You want, and this is going to sound kind of crazy, but you want people to be able to see what your child's all about in a responsible way. And there are ways to do that to protect their data and privacy, but also to showcase talents and expertise academically, sports, musicians, all the things they're doing on TikTok and YouTube and other platforms that we condemn. Universities and internships and employers are looking for that. And the only way I can get to the intangibles of who a student is, especially with all the competition out there, is a responsible platform like LinkedIn or a very clean Instagram or Twitter page.
Great, thank you. And we did have in the chat box, Diana asked about specifics. So I did put LinkedIn in there in the chat box if people are interested, both an app and a website. And I added that you and I both have profiles there that they could just look up and see an adult example anyway.
Sure.
Great. Well, good. Should we continue then, Katey?
Sure. Yep. So we, Max and I speak again on suicide prevention, youth mental health. Prior to COVID, we were already in a pretty deep crisis with youth mental health. Not only as the state of Arizona, but nationwide, we've seen quite an uptick in all of those things. And so I think it's really important as we move into the second phase of COVID that we recognize that this is trauma, that our children and us are experiencing trauma. We are not going to be the same when we come out of this. There will be many, many positives that come out of it, but everything you want to know about your child is on a device. And as a parent, it is our due diligence to be supervising and monitoring, even if they're 17 or 18 years old. And so how you do that is really up to you. I'll give you some tools and resources to be able to do that. But this public health model approach is what you see as this inflection point here. Is we have a ton of kids doing really well. We have some kids moving into distress. And our hope is that our kiddos move from well-being to distress and back to well-being. The unfortunate reality is we do have some students that stay in the lane of distress, and we do have some students that slide into crisis. And so during this pandemic, during regular school, when everything was okay, it is very cryptic, very insidious, very normal for students to be sharing information with each other and not with adults about how they're doing. And students typically know about 6 to 8 weeks ahead of us when someone's not doing well. And so we need to catch them in that lane of distress. And what I continue to see is a whole lot of companies allowing a whole lot of yuck. And a lot of the yuck that's out there contributes to how they feel about themselves, whether it's a friendship, a breakup, their self-esteem, their body image, bullying. There's a whole ton of stuff going on. And what we're missing is the adults currently in the digital world are not competent. We are not trained. We didn't have any training, and we didn't give our kids any training. And so on the next slide, I just gave a pretty graphic example of what some of our students are exposed to. We could talk about suicide all night. I will not. It is a journey. It is very nuanced, very complex, but there are groups on Instagram. There are groups on Facebook. There are groups on all sorts of platforms that are inviting our children into dangerous places. And so I would really encourage you to think about, how am I monitoring my student? Do I have a tool or resource in order to do that? And if not, where can I find out more in order to be able to monitor them better? I have sat with parents who have lost their children, and their children look exactly like yours and mine. The demographic in Arizona, there's not just one candidate for youth suicide, but it is the leading cause of death in the state of Arizona, age 10 to 14 and age 15 to 34. Last year on our well-being study through the state, the bracket that had the most completions was age 15 to 17, with males being the largest group. And so it is important to look in your child's phone. It is important to have courageous conversations. And it's not just one conversation. It is 100 little talks while you're driving to baseball practice. It's 100 little talks at night when the lights are out and you're like, how was your day? And all of a sudden they open up and tell you everything that you want to know. And so some of the parents that I've sat with have said to me, he looked really angry. He said angry things. Sometimes he was crying. Sometimes he was lashing out. He was being a really big jerk. I took his phone away as punishment, but I never looked in the phone. And if I had looked in the phone, I would have understood that what I was seeing in front of me was actually depression manifesting itself as anger and not just being a jerk. And so after hearing that from several mothers and fathers, it really just became part of my platform that every time I speak, to make sure that I include that message that even if he's 17, even if she's 16, they still need us to be diligent about supervision and monitoring. So I think on the next slide, I've given some resources, if I'm not mistaken. Well, this is important too, to lighten up that piece that I just said. So if we're monitoring, if we want to make things better for our children on the front of youth mental health, we have to get them outside, which COVID has totally provided. Even as hot as it is in Arizona, I've never seen so many kids out in my neighborhood. They have to move their bodies. They have to have physical touch from you. They have to have hugs every morning and every night. And they have to have a way to connect. And so when people ask me, what's wrong with kids these days? I tell them, we have gotten so far away from the 4 things that we know to be true about child development that we have to put our devices down and get back to that really healthy place. So the next slide, I'll just close out and then I'll open for any questions. The landing page that I would love people to leave on tonight is, you are going to have to play 3 roles. You're going to have to restrict devices and screen time sometimes. You are going to have to let some things go and enable it because you are exhausted. You are going to have to be a mentor if you want your child to be a great digital citizen and leader. And so out of those 3 roles, if I could choose one for parents to be more of, is a mentor, is to really sit down and get to know, what are they using? Instead of condemning it and shaming it and isolating it and taking it away, learn more about it. And the best teacher of the device is your own child. They know way more than you do, and they want you to be part of that conversation. So step into the fold and try to start being a mentor. Even if you don't understand all of it, you will never understand Snapchat. It is the devil. You will never understand all of the inner workings of it, but you can get to know it a little better. Also, some tandem goals. Identify when you walk by and you're freaking out, like he has been on that phone for 6 hours. What is he actually doing? Is it digital candy or is it digital vegetables? We really need them to be literate in the use of media and technology. If your children are watching any news reports, this is a fantastic time to sit down next to them and say, so what do you think about all this? What do you think about this press briefing? What do you think about what Fauci is saying? What do you think about China? This is a fantastic time to look at 3 different news stations and have them report out to you. Well, I checked this source out and this source is false. This is a great time to be able to invite them into those conversations. And lastly, we really want your child to be self-governed. If your child's going to take flight and leave your house, we need them to be able to use their device for good. We need them to know what to do when someone's mean to them. We need them to be able to say to a predator, nope, no thank you, nope, no thank you. And so the only way we can create kids that are self-governed and dignified on devices is if we give them dignity in the use of it. And so that really goes back to what I started out with, that we have to disarm this us versus them and really create a family plan, a family situation, an ongoing conversation about we're in this together. So many people are fighting over devices and so many kids are isolating in their bedrooms because of it, and they're going to dangerous places. And so I think COVID for me has been a blessing in that I've been pounding pavement for about 15 years saying this, and now everyone's home. And so there's no excuse not to have these types of conversations. And it might not be perfect the first time. It's an ongoing conversation, but your kid has to have a part in it. They have to have a voice in it. So I think the last slide I have is just a resource. And then I saw in the chat, somebody had a question as well.
They did. Let's get the question, then talk about the resource. This is a great one. I have teenage twin boys that don't really want hugs anymore. Well, not as much, LOL. We've all been there. Should I force it? Should I force the hugs to get that physical touch across? Great question.
Scott is a boy dad. You are a boy dad. I have no boys, but I have spent about 95% of my career in my office with boys. And so something to know, like the nerve endings and the shoulders of boys during puberty are actually super sensitive. So I would not grab them around the neck. I would actually make it a competition. So we use the 8-second hug. So 8-second hug in the morning, 8-second hug at night. And we actually make it a competition. So I don't make it like mandatory, but my girls are super affectionate. Boys are a little bit different. But I would suspect with twins that you could give one a hug and then the other would want one. And I guarantee everybody that I have taught the 8-second hug to has come back to me and said, not only has it totally changed my relationship with them, but now they want 16 seconds and 24 seconds. And it's turned into like this big family thing. And what we know to be true about physical touch is we secrete oxytocin, which is our bonding hormone, which then levels out the mood regulation hormone serotonin. And so we don't touch our kids as much as we used to. And on the front of boys, especially twins, and I have a set of twin girls, so I can speak to this, when we took rough and tumble play away from boys, that's when we started seeing huge behavioral changes. And so if they're not able to touch each other at school, then now that they're home, we should be creating an opportunity where they do get that physical touch, both from us and from each other when it's safe within the house. And if not, send them outside.
Yeah. Great point, Katey. Thanks. And yeah, we tried that 8-second here. It's like sometimes you think it's like professional bull riding. You got to just hold on for 8 seconds till you're bucked off. But it does make a difference. And you're right. Over time, the resistance gets a little less, and then sooner or later they even hug you back.
Yeah.
But it happens. Yeah. So do you want to talk about this ERO, and then I will remind before you do that, just hey, we're looking for lots of questions. I know this is a lot of information, and I have a question myself, but we want to hear from you. Again, the Q&A, the chat, or the raise hand. So Katey, you want to close out your slides with this this resource?
Sure. So there are a billion routers out there. I do not work for Eero. I do not have a relationship with them, except that I promote them everywhere I go because I use their product and it works. So Eero is a open mesh filter. So our house has 4 zones. Zones 1, 2, and 3 are programmed to turn off at 8:30 every night. Zone 4 is kept open for adult use. And so again, going back to disarming like when you can have your device and pulling devices and fighting over devices, this is just part of the plan. That part of our plan is at 8:30, devices go up, everyone is either reading a book or getting good sleep, or we're watching a TV show together. And it really helps to kind of centralize those devices on a central charging station. The Eero router also blocks pornography, explicit content from even coming into your home. It also has a third capability that some people really love. I haven't had to use it yet, but you can mute a device by device. So I could mute Mia, I could mute Ava, I could just do one device and not the whole house. And so I'm not a huge fan of that because I don't like the gotcha, I'm going to mute your device, bring me your device thing. But some people really like when they're out at a restaurant and they see their child's been on YouTube for 3 hours, they can mute that specific device or they can shut down the whole network remotely. So you can be in France and remotely turn off your Wi-Fi network. The key for teenagers is if you have a router that turns things off and you don't collect the device, remember that most teenagers have a burner device in their bedrooms, which is an old iPhone they found in your junk drawer. If you don't collect devices, the router will turn the Wi-Fi off and then they will turn their data on that you're paying $1 million for. So you have to have both pieces. You have to have the router shutting things down and then the devices collected on a central charging station. But for me, especially for pornography, explicit content, outlinks, you know, if I'm a creeper, I'm going to put an outlink in Roblox or Fortnite or any kid's game so that a young child is going to click on that and voila, that is the new pathway as to how they sort of start getting addicted to some of these things that we worry about. And so Eero is, again, one of a billion routers that I'd recommend looking into. It does not slow down your Wi-Fi like Circle by Disney. It's an A to B connection, so it's really fast. There's no loss of your work productivity or anything like that. And then my last slide is one of my favorite apps, which is Bark for Families. Bark for Families uses artificial intelligence to run an algorithm on your child's device. So you sync your device to your child's device and any social media or gaming platform that they are on. The artificial intelligence is running 24/7 to pick up any keywords, any contextual data that would alert them that your child is engaging in something worrisome. Categories like predation, exploitation, profanity, bullying, sexting, anybody saying, I want to kill myself, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to blow up the school tomorrow. And so Bark does an amazing job of alerting parents to those warning signs. And then they also follow that up with, before you freak out, you just got this alert. Here are 3 things to think about before you have a conversation with your child. And so it also gives you the parent education and some tips. They have a ton of, you know, different ways that you can connect with your child after receiving the alert. I do not encourage people to use this as a gotcha. This is a tool to, again, step into the fold to be able to have a conversation with your child like, hey, I saw what Maddie said to you last night. Are you okay? And to have your child say, no, I'm not, or I don't want to talk about it. But then 3 days later, you're driving to the dollar store and she brings it up and says, I actually do want to talk about it. You know, Chloe's being really mean to Maddie. And so I love Bark. I think it's a genius platform. It runs algorithms on 150 different social media and gaming platforms, including Snapchat and Instagram. And so those are just easy ways, like $7 a month. I think it's $9 for the advanced extra level now. Easy ways to be able to have a smoke alarm and a pulse on what your kiddo's doing. They have thwarted school threats, school shootings, all sorts of sexual activity by predators. So it is something that I would highly encourage parents, especially in this time, to look into. And that code there, which I'll have the district post, also gives you a 20% off discount as well.
We had hi, Katey, I muted myself again. We had a question about cost. Did you say Bark is about $7 a month?
So Bark Junior is $7 a month, and then the new version of Bark, which also includes screen time monitoring, meaning you can shut it down from the device, is $9.99. But this 20% off code would give them a discount on that.
Great. And in the chat we just had from Mr. and Ms. MP, it says Bark is excellent, and we got our kids on board by saying it is a way for them to keep their privacy way more than any other kind of monitoring would. So great strategy.
We love testimonials. Yes.
Yeah. And I think, Katey, aren't we having somebody from Bark on the May 21st webinar?
The CTO is Tatiana Jordan. She will be on talking about Bark for families and probably the younger grades as far as screen time balance and monitoring.
Great. So yeah, one of a representative from Bark will be with us. And a couple more things. One about Bark and then one about EERO. Does the Bark app restrict certain apps like Snapchat, or does it just monitor it?
So if the only way that you could restrict Snapchat is not allowing your child to download it. If you have already given permission for your child to have Snapchat, Bark would monitor Snapchat. It does not monitor Snapchat stories, and that is not a Bark issue. That is a Snapchat doesn't want to let them in issue. They are working pretty hard to be able to do that because most students reside in Snapchat stories. That's where they exchange all of their information with each other. So it does run algorithms on Snapchat and Instagram, but it doesn't give access to every single mechanism within those two apps. So the only way to restrict Snapchat is to not allow permission to have it.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I agree with what you said about Snapchat. Though today I just read something that when they turn 18, they forward a message on how to register to vote. So thus far, it's the only positive thing I've heard about Snapchat.
I will say, like on the front of Snapchat and TikTok, especially during COVID. So not everything is evil. So Snapchat was built in 2011 as a sexting app. That's why everything goes poof. So if you've already given your child Snapchat and it's driving you crazy, you should get to know Snapchat. If you've already given TikTok and you are okay with them dancing and doing all the fun stuff, that's great. There are ways to be safe on both of those platforms. But again, it goes back to parents dialing in, understanding the app itself, and having conversations. There are ways to have a private TikTok. Nothing is completely private. If your child is dancing in her bedroom on a private TikTok account, that TikTok account is still being housed on a server in a cloud and is still able to be hacked into or messaged. And so there are ways to be safer on those. And any teenager will tell you, we do not text anymore. We TikTok and we Snapchat. And they are 100% correct. You're probably not going to win that battle. So my advisement would be, if you've given it and you have a 16 or 17-year-old, I would not take Snapchat or TikTok away during COVID and think that you are going to win. So I would rather have you step into it, make it safer, have conversations around it. And that includes talking about pornography, like really talking about it, because it's there and it's part of both of those platforms in a pretty fierce way.
Yeah. And every school district we talk to, when you talk about filtering, that is the number one thing that they filter out is pornography use from kids even on school computers who are trying to access it from school. Hey, we had a question about EERO and the cost of that. Do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, it depends on the square footage of your house. So for like a house that's under 2,000 square feet, it's $199. For a house 2,000 square feet and above is $299. I did notice during COVID, they've been running specials on, it's sold through Amazon. You can buy it through eero.com or Amazon and Best Buy. And I did notice they were having 20% off during COVID. So, and it's super easy to set up. It's one beacon. You just put it into an outlet and then you hook the router in. It's very, very easy to set up.
Great, thanks. Well, we had, Katey, should I stop sharing, or did you have any more that you wanted to share?
That's it on slide.
Okay, let's get you back up on full screen. And we did have a hand up. I think it was Jim, but it's not down. It's down now. It may have been a mistake. So, Jim, if you have a question, your mic is open. If you want to open it up and have a question, if not, we'll take some others on chat or Q&A.
Actually, yeah, I did that by accident, but I can ask it anyway.
Great.
So yeah, we've got, say, a real teenager, 15, who's, the lion out of the cage. We'd like to put her back in, and we can start doing these things, but I can see some serious, kickback on this, pushback. So, I suppose you can just gradually do it. You don't want to just cut things off entirely. But if there's some kind of an advised way to do that, that would be great. So, and by the way, the Eero Secure stuff, I think there's a monthly fee on that, by the way. Just
okay. What is this? May 14th. So I would give any parent on this webinar 6 to 8 weeks actually, let me back that up. I would give yourself till June 1st to not do anything. Like, really think about what you heard tonight. Think about, is a plan even feasible for my family? Is dialing back any of this feasible? And really choose your battles. Like, if she's a pretty good kid and she is pulling great academics, good behavior, and she's socially, emotionally well, perhaps you don't have to do a ton of work. But if any of those things are derailing, that's kind of my litmus test during regular school academic time. When parents ask, like, grades are going down, behavior's going down, hygiene's going down, then you don't get the privilege of technology. So that's part of the plan, is technology is a privilege. We're gonna work on this together. Here are some things that are non-negotiables. No devices in the bedroom, you're getting good sleep, no devices at the dinner table. Like, as a family, really, and if you're married, coming up with it as a united front. The most frustrating part of what I've heard is, and this is a sweeping overgeneralization, but many dads are working outside of the home, mom's managing the kids and maybe working herself, and mom is waging the screen time battle, and then dad comes home and is like, they're fine. And mom and dad start battling over that. And so you have to be a united front in this. This is truly about the safety of your children, their wellness, and protecting them from not many people that have ill intent. But as far as your daughter is concerned, I would not come out of the gate tomorrow and be like, hey, we went to this webinar and we're taking your device away. Don't do that. That will go horribly for you. And you won't have had enough time to process, how do we want to give her dignity in the use of her device? And how are we going to have that mutual respect for each other as we make these changes? So it is a process. And you may say to yourself, I'm not going to die on this hill about Snapchat, but I am going to die on this hill about devices in the bedroom. And so my biggest concern would be preserving your relationship, because when we take things away and we take a device away and we don't build the skill, the behavior never changes. So a ton of people take devices away thinking she's going to clean her room. If you don't teach the skill of how to clean your room, taking the device away does nothing, and then they work around you on the burner phone, and you have no control over what's going on. So for me, we have to stop this dance that we're doing and really build the skills of what we want the behavior to look like and act like, if that makes sense.
Great. Thank you, Jim, for asking the question. I don't see any other hands up. I'm going to do a quick screen share here, Katey, just maybe to let our parents know the common phrase we hear these days is we're all in this together. So this is not just a random shot off the internet. This is one of my very close friends. He's younger than I. This is his daughter during emergency remote teaching. There's a teacher on the laptop. she's playing Fortnite on her phone and has a TV show on in the bedroom. and he sent me a shot and he said, Max, what do I do? And so my advice was get outside. But I think a lot of us are fighting this battle, and it's just kind of let everybody know we are in this together. And I think waiting until June was good. But Katey, I had a question. So we've all probably seen our kids or in my case grandkids post something inappropriate on Instagram or whatever. And I caught him once. I mean, it was really bad. And I sent him a text message right away. I said, hey, just saw your Instagram, take that down. You just look foolish. You're making yourself look foolish. He took it down, but then he also blocked me from his Instagram account, deleted it. And I'm sure he has another 2 or 3 back channel ones. And I felt bad at the time, but I was he was, the Instagram goes to the family. It was really terrible. And it just embarrassed me, and I'm sure it would have embarrassed him had he thought about it. But, adolescent boys' brains are not fully developed, as we well know.
Right.
But it really, I don't know if we did the right thing or not, but it has changed our relationship a bit, not necessarily for the better.
Yeah, I think going back to the brain piece, knowing nobody can handle this medium. I mean, people are fighting about COVID and masks, and like adults can't handle this medium. Children cannot handle this medium. And so we already know from science that social media overwhelms their brains, video games overwhelm their brains, and that they are going to make fantastically horrible mistakes under your roof and the roof of the school. And as trusted adults, we continue to say to them, come to us, tell us this stuff as informants of the front line. But when they come to us, we sometimes shame them, we isolate them, we condemn them. And as schools, specifically, I do a lot of trainings on what's the pathway back for the student after the suspension. So they were sexting or they posted a threat or whatever that looks like. What's the diversion program that you have that this child can then redeem themselves? We have had, and it was in Illinois actually, we've had students that were falsely accused of sexting or sexual behavior, and they have walked out of the school and taken their life because they didn't feel like they had a pathway back. And so we have to think as parents as well, they are going to look at pornography. They are going to send body parts because we have not talked to them about it being a crime. And even when you talk to them about it being a crime, this is what they're doing. This is what their underdeveloped brains are doing. And so those conversations have to be, I wish they start at age 8. I encourage elementary parents, like, you have to be talking about this, but we have to give them a way to restore themselves because we've handed over this medium that is much too powerful for them. And it's not their fault. It's our fault, like all of our fault. And so as schools and parents, we have to give that pathway back.
Great. Well, thank you. I think we have time for one more quick question, and then we'll turn this back to Scott and run a poll. The question is, when you say no device in the bedroom, do you mean only during sleep time? So, that last picture was of the young lady, my friend's daughter, literally during school time. So do you mean only during sleep time, or what do you mean, not in the bedroom?
I sort of do mean, like, if it's going to be in the bedroom, the door needs to be open. There's just so much yuck out there that they are being sent. It's not even maybe your child that's engaging in it. It's a kid that's sending it to them. And so I work with a lot of law enforcement officers, and one of them taught me that the computer needs to be where the carpet is most worn in your home. You have to have it in an open space. We shouldn't be allowing laptops in bedrooms. I mean, if you ran a scan on your child's laptop, there's probably some stuff on there that you don't know about. And so if you're not using a router like Eero or something like that, and you're not using something like Bark to monitor, you really don't know what's going on. And even the best of kids, I mean, Max and I and Scott and Gary, the best of children, my favorite students, have done some really dangerous and dumb things. And it wasn't their fault. They didn't have the training. Their brain wasn't ready for that. So again, please don't go tomorrow and take all the devices away. That would be horrible. But really, I would love for parents who are listening to process this and really decide, you know, where are we headed with this second phase of COVID? We don't know what school is going to look like. We do know there will probably be some online learning continuing. And so it's just something to consider.
Great. And thank you so much, Katey. I learned something from you all the time. I'm going to turn this over to Scott to close out.
Okay.
Katey, I'll put up our contact information and a little about the next 2 webinars in the series as well. So Scott, to you.
Thanks, Max. You know what? As I promised you all, it was spectacular. So let's give Katey a hand. And Max, thanks again, as always, for putting this stuff together for us. We always appreciate that. We will be back on Tuesday. And we'll have a little preview. If you go to our website, you'll see what's going on Tuesday. There you go. And so we hope to see you then.
Great. And thank you, Scott. And here's also on this website, you'll see the slide deck. And here's the QR code with Katey's recommendations. And here is our email. And I think you're seeing a poll. Please answer our poll. And Katey, again, it's always great to spend time with you and to hear from you. And we'll both be with you again next week on Tuesday and on Thursday. And special thanks to the Deer Valley team for this great seminar. It's really visionary, and we appreciate it. And great job, and as always, putting kids and community first, Scott and Gary and the entire DVUSD leadership team. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
So Scott, I'll make sure that Monica has the flyer for next Tuesday. So
Okay.
Tuesday is Maria Desmondi and Michael Klinkner, who's a licensed clinical social worker. They're both fabulous. And Tatiana is on Thursday. She's the
Perfect.
Chief Talent Officer from BARC for families.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. She's kind of focused on middle school a little bit.
Elementary and middle.